Okay, so friends, colleagues, on behalf of Transforming Communities for Inclusion and the Validity Foundation, with pride and sadness, we welcome you here today to mark the life, the achievements, and the contributions of Professor Gabor Gambos, who sadly passed away last week. We don't have a very formal agenda here today, but what we wanted to do was to provide a space for those who were in Gabor's good books, if I can put it like that, to come together, to share our thoughts, share our memories, and to provide a space for reflection for us all. We have been reaching out to many of you over the last few days, and we are so grateful for the messages that we have received, and indeed the wide range of memories that you all bring of Gabor and his work and his life, in fact, which I think inspires so many of us here today. We have a list of those of you who have asked to speak, but I'm sure we may not have captured all of you. So if it's okay, we'll start with our first speaker, and this will be Dr. Shandor Gurbay, who is Impact Manager with Validity and a close friend and colleague of Gabor. And following that, we'll go through the list that we have before us, with also a few written messages that we've also received from those who can't attend. Please feel free to reach out in the chat box, and we will try to make sure everyone has an opportunity to speak who would wish to do so. Shandor, can I please hand you the floor?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. So my name is Shandor Sanyi for many of us, and for Gabor as well. I was a friend, and Sanyi called me as Sanyi. I first met Gabor like more than 15 years ago, and currently the Conference of States Parties are taking place in New York, and now we are in New York. So my memory is like the first memory which comes to my mind about Gabor is that 10 years ago I was here with Gabor in New York, and he was nominated by the then Hungarian government to be a member of the CRPD committee, and Gabor asked me to support him. You know, he was not allowed, of course, to be in the conference room where the elections were taking place. So he asked me to do something, to go somewhere, and I asked Gabor where he wanted to go, and he said, "Let's go to the MoMA, to the Museum of Modern Art." And I like this idea and so much, and we had very nice time together with Gabor. And when we returned to the UN, it turned out that he was elected to be a member of the committee. And so like he many times told me or told us stories about the negotiations of the CRPD. That was a really important, these years were really important for Gabor, and also how the International Disability Caucus operated. I mean, Gabor, these were one of those favorite topics for Gabor, which he told us stories all the time. I remember one thing. Once I was working for the, again, like from the High Court in Hungary, and that workshop was how to in the CRPD in Hungary, and positive measure, and Gabor was like really surprised and even shocked about that, how guardianship could be a positive measure, and he shared his view with the judge, like in an uncompromising tone. Look at guardianship as a positive measure of positive discrimination. I also remember report under Article 12. Many times we were chatting about that. And for Gabor, it was about interdependence. He could not imagine like a trust-based support relationship which could bring like advantages only for the supported person. So I understood that for Gabor, a kind of support relationship was about mutual learning and progress. Then I learned that this, to me then, and for Gabor as well, that was a that was friendship. And it meant, for example, that when Gabor was not well, he called me even during the night, and we were talked for hours. And also it also meant that when I had like personal problems in my life, I spoke about them to Gabor and told him that I was not able to cope with my tasks as a father or husband, as a lawyer, and he just very simply like said that he looked at me and said that you don't need to do everything. It is okay if you cannot do things. It is okay not to be perfect. So that was of course, I have so many memories about Gabor, but I would like to give the floor to others as well. So I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shoni. Colleagues, we also have a number of people who wanted to attend but can't for various reasons, but many people have written their messages to us. And if I may, we'll share one message that we have here from Ron McCallum, former chair of the CRPD committee during Gabor's era, who sadly can't join us due to an accident, I think, that he's had. So we wish him well too. He writes, I first met Professor Gabor Gambos in New York at the elections for the CRPD committee. He taught me a great deal about persons who have psychosocial disabilities. After our several conversations, I always came away with a warm heart. Professor Gabor Gambos was a pioneering member of the CRPD committee in its early days. In particular, he led a working group on our first general comment on Article 12 of the CRPD. His lived experience gave depth to our discussions. In my view, the first general comment on Article 12 has ushered in a paradigm shift in the attitudes of governments and of the medical profession to people with psychosocial disabilities. I think we have some other speakers here, perhaps. I'm wondering if we have Erzsébet Foldeshi or Zsuzsu here with us.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. I am here. Yeah, so that means that you give the floor to me, Ellen. Yeah, okay. So, dear participants, dear Gabor friends and peers, first of all, let me thank the organizers for having this event. I think no event could have been more worthy of the occasion to Remembrance of Gabor than this one, so closely linked to the CRPD, which was so close to Gabor's heart. Let me thank you also for having me here so that we can pay tribute to Gabor's life and celebrate his life with appreciation of his human and professional work. I'm Erzsébet, a former activist of the disability movement, disabled myself. I was active on Hungarian and European and somewhat on international level. But up to now, I am committed to the disability movement and to disabled people's rights, because you all know that its commitment is like somehow an addiction which you can't just put off from one day to another. Several times in his life, Gabor relied on his friends to help him and find solution to crucial, important questions. He never wanted to be in contact with any authority, any court, any institution, because he knew it well, that an authority is an authority, and there is no time, according to the experience, for anyone to find a personalized solution to his situation, especially not a solution with his meaningful involvement and agreement. Gabor was well aware of the isolation and neglect in residential institutions, the system which in adulthood legally relegates anyone to the status of a child, we all know it, and deprives disabled people of their fundamental rights to make their decision on their daily lives. Gabor's health situation in the last for 3 years was very crucial. He had to stay in bed, and let us admit that lying in bed, living alone in a household, there is a little chance for anyone in Hungary to live the same life as others without any assistance. With the help of friends alone, it was very difficult to maintain the everyday order in Gabor's home. There was not always help to get food to his bed. And finally, Gabor was forced to contact the social local service system, asking for personal assistance at least twice a week. He would have requested this assistance, of course, also for the weekends, but these services close for the weekends. That was the COVID-19 outbreak underway when Gabor turned to the social service. And before the district home care service even tried to find any solution for personal assistance on weekdays, the service required the immediate hospitalization of Gabor. That was the entrance to the social services. So Gabor was hospitalized in spite of the fact that only urgent cases were taken to the hospital in those times. And then in the hospital, he met at least 3-4 people with COVID-19, and he was at least in 2-3 rooms, moved around in the hospital. And that happened that on the request of the social system, a psychiatrist went to the hospital to assess and justify that Gabor needs a guardianship. It appeared that Gabor's previous psychiatric history overrode his actual problem, because he had a big problem with atrophy of muscles. That's why he could not move from the bed. And then it was considered that someone with psychiatric disorder and muscle wasting living in such circumstances could only be helped by the guardian. And the psychiatrist examined Gabor in the hospital and asked Gabor if he thought that the guardian would be good for him. Gabor said that to his knowledge, the assistance that he needed was not the job of a guardian, or not the task of the guardian. He said that a support group kept daily contact with him. That was several of us. Through us, he got a second-hand wheelchair, a walker, not through the system. And then he also told that we organized cleaning of his flat. He would like to get a personal assistant from the local service twice a day, and everything in his own home. During the conversation with the psychiatrist, between the psychiatrist and Gabor, it became clear that Gabor's mental capacity and his circumstances did not justify the guardianship, despite the request of the social services managers. Gabor won this battle. Instead of guardianship, by chance, in Hungary, and I think in a lot of countries in the world, he received personal assistance services. Actually, Gabor reached and proved what he wanted. As a person with high support needs, he was able to live independently in his own home with the assistance of local services, because several services went to Gabor in close cooperation with his support group. It was not easy, but difficulties are not subject of today's memorial event. Actually, I am happy to have been part of this support group of someone who fought so hard for the rights of persons with disabilities, who stood up for the deinstitutionalization, and who advocated for the abolition of the institution of guardianship. I think the Hungarian, the European, and the international disability movement has been really enriched by Gabor's life. I think that's what we have to celebrate today. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you very much, Zsuzsa. And thank you to all of the network in Hungary who I know were so very, very close with Gabor over recent years, providing support in the best way possible in a system that still has a very, very long way to go, we know. I'd like, if I may, to invite Tirza Leibovitz, if possible, to provide some remarks.
Hello, everyone. So in the journey to, ongoing journey to uncover and face and remedy systems of oppression, wherever they occur, I have learned, among others, that once we've identified and uncovered a system of oppression, it's not the role of those who are oppressed and fighting against it to persuade others to come along. That's something that, society has to, deal with and figure out for itself. That I've learned. But I do want to say that for Gabor is someone who actually was willing to engage with those who are not there and who need to be shown the way, and who need help who need some auxiliary means to come to the place of seeing this, the systems of discrimination, of oppression, and joining the struggle against it. And he was, I just found that one needs a lot of grace to do that. And he did that. And I just want to share one insight that I forever carry with me, that it's an insight from Gabor. You know how it is when people, in life, you go with just nuggets of some people who've made an imprint on you by one sentence or by one scene or one experience, and then it's forever connected to that person. So that's Gabor for me. And I remember in one instance, Gabor explaining, helping conceptualize the state that we're in, where we understand the paradigm that we aspire to, the new paradigm. We all call it the paradigm shift, etc. But also understanding that what we have is, we have old tools, we have still old language, we still have current existing systems. And it's almost, there's something almost paradoxical at getting to the new paradigm, but we still have the old one in place, and we've got to be using that to get to the new. Just having him conceptualize that, recognize that, explain that, I found extremely enlightening and helpful, both the actual content of this and also that grace of willing to engage with people where they are. And I think that takes a big soul to be in the new, to see the new, to embody the new, and to look at the old and bring them along. So that's for me is Gabor, and I carry that in my heart. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tirza. I believe Professor Anna Lawson wanted to join us today from the University of Leeds, but I understand she unfortunately has also had an accident, but has sent her deep sympathies for this event. There is a written message that I'd like to read out, if you just give me a moment. Professor Gabor Gambos's family and friends are in our thoughts. His legacy will live on. His achievements and commitment to being a change maker will be remembered and a source of inspiration. I am looking at the list and I'm wondering whether to invite, could I perhaps invite Victoria Lee, if you are here? Victoria?
Mm-hmm.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Hi, can you hear me? So firstly, thanks very much for organizing this. It's very special to be able to come together and to remember Gabor and everything that he meant for us and for the movement. I had the privilege of and the pleasure of working with Gabor when I joined what used to be known as MDAC in early 2007. Back then, the CRPD had just been adopted and I was starting out on disability rights. So I had a lot to learn. And Gabor graciously mentored me on CRPD and particularly on legal capacity. And he offered me much patience, the same he offered to everyone who wanted to learn. And his priority was always to bring it back to the human side by sharing stories and experiences. And true to his vision in nature, it was he who led the committee and the adoption of its first general comment on legal capacity, as we've heard. We know this can be a very technical topic, touching on legal concepts and constructs, but Gabor always referred to Article 12 in the most human of ways as the heart of the convention. And over the years, we worked together at MGC and when he was an expert at the CRPD committee, and also during his tenure as a board member of IDA. We did many missions together, doing training and monitoring. And I remember those times fondly, despite the huge workload. I always felt safe with him, reassured, and we could disconnect from these intense sessions. We enjoyed our time walking and exchanging stories. In our work, it never ceased to impress me how he could so simply and eloquently convey very difficult and challenging concepts, be it to fellow advocates, to national authorities, psychiatrists, from experts who think they know everything, to persons who are locked away, who feel they have lost everything. He had the gift of teaching. We know, he comes from he was a theoretical physicist, so naturally he had a vast understanding of very complex things that most of us cannot even begin to grasp. Yet he could explain things in simple and plain terms. But his gift of teaching was not just knowing things and explaining things. It was observing, listening, intuiting what was the approach to take, where was the resistance, where a bridge needed to be built, where an opening lied. And that's what made him a brilliant advocate and a brilliant individual and friend. So it was much more than teaching. His was the gift of sharing, exchanging, building, of forging. Naturally, the principles and values were always there, but it was about how to share them with others and forge new alliances and new paths to keep those values and principles alive. This he shared with me and all who knew him. Just to end, I want to borrow from Bhargavi's written tribute that may we continue to carry the torch that he lived for us on the CRPD, yes, and much beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. We have with us also George Hugovorst, who has offered to take the floor at this point. George.
Yes, okay. I join the people who's thankful for this event. The people from Hungary. Yes, I'm always a bit emotional when somebody's passing away. I want to share some pictures of 2004. That was my memories go back to 2004 in Vejle, Denmark, with the General Assembly of WNUSP, working for our human rights and dignity. It was very great solidarity, that feeling. Then I saw Bhargavi, who was always also there. And I see that Tina has also joined, and Mary Nettle, I also met there. I shall try to share the picture. Even kijken hoor. Share screen. It's a bit technical, but oh no. Even kijken. No. Even kijken. I shall try another way. Maybe you can see this. This was Sven Auksson from Iceland, the partner of Tina Minkiewicz. I don't remember, Gabor, of course, and Georgette Goutaars, and Peter Lehmann from Germany. It was a great feeling of solidarity back then. And I also remember Gabor as a very kind and person. Okay, I'll leave it with this. It's a bit emotional, but I hope I have contributed somewhat to this meeting.
Thank you so much, George. That was very beautiful. May I now please offer the floor? I believe, do we have Teresia Degener here? Do we have Teresia Degener? May I?
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to contribute a little bit to this so important memorial. It is such a loss that Gabor passed away. I met Gabor in the preparation of the ad hoc committee which drafted the CRPD, and later was a colleague with him on the CRPD committee. And I remember Gabor as a very kind and wise man. His experiences as, I guess, a survivor of psychiatry was of tremendous importance for the CRPD committee. He helped us understand how important the first general comment on Article 12 was, and he helped to make that document a truly transformative human rights document. Gabor knew, and he taught us, that in the CRPD committee, it is very important that only a very radical rejection of substitute decision-making, guardianship, and so forth, as well as forced treatment and institutionalization of any kind, is the only way forward. And he knew that if we leave any loophole or backdoor for guardianship regimes, that would undermine the CRPD standard. And I think that was his biggest contribution to the committee, that he helped us learn to understand that, and everyone, even though we were not always on the same opinion or as radical as Gabor was, but we learned from him and he'd helped us to understand. And I'm very thankful for this kind teaching of me and others. He was a great speaker, a great scientist, academic scholar, and I was had the honor to be at many conferences together with him and events. And again, there I learned from him as well. His passing is a terrible loss for the international disability rights movement. And I hope that he may rest in peace and power. Thank you for allowing me to speak here.
Thank you so much, Teresia. I'd like to invite Bhargavi, please, to the floor.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for creating this opportunity to remember Gabor. I remember him very visually, and I would like to remember him, dancing with some of us, doing a big jig right there on the Korean highway. There were about 30, 40 of us. And we got onto this like dais and platform, and we were so happy dancing with Gabor. That's one of the most precious memories I have of him. And George reminded me that I had done this also with him, and several others, some of the senior members who founded the World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry in Weiler, 2004, meeting Gabor, and again, lots and lots of dancing and singing and celebration of, being survivors of psychiatry. That sense of community never retrieved for me after that. And those are two very fond memories of Gabor having fun that I carry with me. And I was honored to have had those moments of fun and laughter with him. I also remember Gabor as one of the people who had the uncanny knack of presenting complex ideas, sometimes humorously. So one of the punchlines I carried away with me, which I still use in my training sessions here in India, is you're pregnant or you're not pregnant. You cannot be like half pregnant. Explaining legal capacity concept. Either it is there or it is not there. You can't say that you're half pregnant. So such wit. I mean, I think for me, it's like, in India, we have this concept of unsound mind. He was definitely of unsound mind, in that sense, in a legal sense. And thank you so much for sharing those really, really touching moments of his struggle with guardianship. But it's very rare to see such indomitable reason, argumentation, debate, challenge put your way. For someone very, very grassroots like me, his CRPD avatar, he came to us in India in 2007. His CRPD avatar was very scary. I was like so grassroots, so, just this little world of trying to create some supportive communities and doing badly at that. And he told us that, this is not the way to go. And we literally brought down the entire program after his visit. He expected absolute integrity to the spirit of the CRPD, absolute. You can't compromise on that. He challenged old habits at every opportunity, whoever it was and wherever he was. The incapacity of people and systems to change old habits and the conventional way of thinking about us. So the incapacity was not in us. The unsound nature, the unsound mentality was not in us. It was in policies, laws, systems. It's not in us. The lack of insight was in those places and not in us. And every opportunity he could subvert, the governmentality and policy making and, put it on its head and say, hey, that's the CRPD. He did it every time. And we learned a lot from that. At the time when the CRPD came in, identities like user and survivor were not familiar. In 2004, I joined the World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry and then became a board member. Actually, it was Tina Minkowitz who's here. She took my initiation interview, if I may put it like that, to explore if I was a user and survivor. And I was like, what is that, And eventually I got that part. For sure, I was a survivor. But it didn't go very deep as an identity, even though the hurt I carried, the humiliation I carried, and the violence that happened on me was huge. There were not many people like this in my country. By 2007, the CRPD came in, and Gabor came to India just after with Amita Dhanda's support and facilitation to engage at the national level on legal harmonization. I got the amazing opportunity to spend about 6 months in his live presence here in India, in Pune. And that was really one of the most transforming experiences I've had in my life. He taught me to use the words person with psychosocial disability, user and survivor of psychiatry with dignity and pride. Years of ridicule and humiliation in my country had left me feeling very small and very hurt. I had no identity and therefore no pride in my identity. Through the 6 months he stayed with us in Pune, and thereafter, my stature as a person with a psychosocial disability developed. I dismantled my old conventional way of doing my program of community support, redid the design. We just closed down everything and we started all over again. He was adoring of the CRPD, and he shone with that adoration. He offered it to people without any reservations. I received it with gratitude. CRPD is so uplifting when you know it well. He shared it unreservedly. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I have so many photographs. So in the last few days, I've been sifting over the emails and photographs, retrieving them, and yeah, and just remembering Gabor. Yeah. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thank you so much, Raghavian. Thank you so much for all of your support to help make this opportunity, this event come together today. We have another message, if I may read, from Priscilla Geiser, director at IDA, who can't attend today. And it reads, I met Gabor only a few times, but these always had an imprint upon me. I was first amazed by his intelligence and clarity of thoughts, which opened my eyes to the reality of discriminations experienced by persons with psychosocial disabilities and robust arguments to combat prejudice and harmful practices. As we worked together on building the first bridge training module, I also met a very humble, kind and attentive person behind the professor. Thank you so much, Gabor, for what you brought to this world. I'd now like to give the floor, if I may, to Branka Mejic. Branka, are you with us?
Hello, dear friends. It's really great to be here with you today, and I'm sure that Gabor would also be happy to see all of us here and sharing the memory and the life and work, his life and work. I am here actually to testify of what Victoria called his great gift of teaching, because it was first time that I met him in that role. I had the honor to be one of his students at a summer school organized by then MDAC on the mental disability law in practice, which was held almost to the date 11 years ago in Budapest. And he was one of the professors there, but I'm sure that all colleagues who were at that course would agree that he was indeed the most memorable one. And I always saw him as a kind of Olympic flame burning with passion for the CRPD and able to pass on that flame to so many of us who were then at the summer school and who then continued spreading the flame in our countries. Somehow inspired by what we heard and by that passion for the CRPD and guardianship and the legal capacity, I organized in my organization, Ombudsman for Persons with Disability in Croatia, a very big conference on that topic, and it was logical to invite Gabor as one of the speakers, so that over 300 participants that we gathered from different walks of life, professionals, judges, social workers could hear firsthand about the paradigm shift and about this vision that they've never heard of before, and that they could actually see from his lived testimony that this is indeed possible, that the new way of treating persons in a vulnerable situation can indeed happen. And that he really excelled in that role, and I can really confirm, and I'm so happy that so many of you mentioned his gift of a presenter. And I still remember one of the comparisons when he was telling us about the negotiations around the CRPD and trying to explain what a consensus is and how all the articles were actually a result of consensus. And then he said that consensus is like a family going on a trip, and they all want to go to a different place, and then they agree to go somewhere entirely else, and then they indeed reach a joint decision, but everybody is unhappy. So it stayed with me to this day, along with so many of his similes and comparisons and delight with the CRPDs, which I also, along with many others of us who have met him and who attended his summer schools in Budapest and then later on in Galway, can still continue. So we at that time we printed a T-shirt for him as a sign of our appreciation for everything that we got from him in those 2 weeks, and it said, "We've heard your voice." We somehow felt that he was telling us so much about the CRPD, but the life in general, about accepting not only those who are struggling, but all of us when we are struggling and when we are imperfect and when we are indeed being human. So I'm really happy to see all of us here today and know that what he did and his work and legacy will continue to live, and that we will continue spreading this same message. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Branka. Could I think, invite next to the floor Diane Richler, please? Diane Richler.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you to all of the people who organized this event and to those of you who have already spoken. I first met Gabor when I was the president of Inclusion International, and for me, it's really striking to see the range of people who are paying tribute, both by being on this call and people who have sent messages, because I think it's such an illustration of the way Gabor was able to connect with so many different people around very complex issues. And certainly, when I first met Gabor during the negotiations of the CRPD, the concept of legal capacity was really being explored as a new issue. And so far, all of the speakers have talked about how Gabor helped to bring the issue to life and how he helped to frame it within the convention and then with the committee in terms of how to interpret it. But in the early days of discussions, the perspectives of Inclusion International and, for example, the World Network were very, very different. The initial concerns that we arrived at were very different. And I'm happy to say that despite his analogy about consensus sometimes not making anybody happy, with Gabor's help, he helped us to reach a consensus that did make us happy. He really was able to show compassion and really worked hard to understand the concerns of families of people with very significant intellectual disabilities for whom expressing their own personal desires functions best. But he really broke down barriers between the different groups. And, you know, again, when I see the range of people who are paying tribute to Gabor and realize that in the early days of the convention negotiations, there was a lot of conflict. And Gabor was one of the few people who could break through that and could bring together people who had very, very different starting positions, help them to see the other position, help them to understand it, and figure out how to come up with solutions that would satisfy everybody, that would deal with everybody's concerns. I think that, you know, some of the words that were used just in the invitation to the event, he was a guru. He had a presence, a mystic presence, and he somehow was above the fray. The rest of us could sort of get into these heated arguments and get very emotional, and Gabor would calm us down. He would lay out, he would analyze what the real issues were. He would help us to disentangle them. And I really appreciated that later when I was the chair of IDA, and he always helped to build consensus among the various members. He was a glue that kept all of us together. There are many of you that I haven't seen for a long time, and the memory of him will always be part of the glue that keeps us together. I'll always remember his kindness, his empathy, his generosity. I miss him, and I know that his memory will continue to inspire us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Diane. I believe we have here Janos Fiala Butora. Could I invite you?
Thank you, Stephen. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for Validity for organizing this event. I will not speak for long. I have known Gabor since 2004. I believe we joined MDAC at that time, MDAC almost at the same time, and we very early started working together. Many of you mentioned how much we learned from Gabor, and I remember him as a very effective public speaker. He actually taught me how to deliver good presentations, because I was quite nervous at the time. But the way I would like to remember Gabor the most is not about one of his public performances. Let me tell you a short story how we worked with Gabor on the legal reform process in Hungary at that time. So we managed to organize a small coalition of NGOs during the Hungarian guardianship reform process. It was a civil code recodification process. There was no CRPD at that time. The CRPD was being prepared, and as representatives of those coalitions, together with another organization, Sanyi Gurbai was also a member, but sometimes it was just MDAC invited to those negotiations, which were attended mostly by judges of the Supreme Court and higher courts and prosecuting authorities, so quite influential figures. And then there were us from an NGO, and they really didn't take us seriously. And after the first meeting, we knew how to go about it. We developed a bad cop, even worse cop strategy, where I was the lawyer, so they were speaking to me somewhat, and I was telling them about international law, human rights, and how guardianship just doesn't conform to that. Until we got to the stage at the discussion where they mentioned, but legal proceedings, why would even persons with psychosocial disabilities would want to be involved in that? I mean, they don't really understand all that. Courts, And then I would ask, I mean, why? How do you think persons with intellectual disabilities are? You know, they can barely speak, and all these prejudice notions about how persons with psychosocial disabilities cannot properly function. And then Gabor would take on, like, could you please tell me more, like explain how they are? And after 2 minutes, he would identify himself as, he would explain who he is. And then he would start talking about what guardianship really is about. To those judges. So effectively, that at the end, it resulted in supported decision-making being recognized in Hungary. It was a great success. So it was a great honor working with Gabor, and I will always remember that image in my mind, how he's lecturing the highest judiciary in Hungary. Thank you.
Thank you so much, János. I'd like to bring in, if possible, Tina Minkovits. Tina?
Thank you, Stephen. I'm trying to get close so you can hear me, make sure it's working. It's not, is it working now? I just want to acknowledge the time that I knew Gabor, both during the ad hoc committee, the work on the convention, and as we were co-chairs in the World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry, and then of course with all his work as a member of the committee. Gabor and I did not always agree, and I think I was often someone who was getting very far ahead, and he was explaining things, as many of you have really eloquently explained. He was explaining things to make sure to bring along those who weren't so quick to get it. I will share just one memory of him in the ad hoc committee, a contribution that I remember that was really important on Article 14, both that he made a very humanistic intervention about who are the people in the institutions, and also that he lobbied the European Union to get them to accept a better version of paragraph 2 that was going to help us. And I know that just gets very technical, and people who know what I'm talking about might know, and then it's hard for me to explain right now. But it's really heartening to hear all of the speakers today and the impact that Gabor had on so many lives. He was certainly an important activist in our global movement. And yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak, and for having this memorial, and yeah, condolences and really heartfelt sorrow for all those, especially who really loved Gabor and were close to him. And I'm going to go to another meeting. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Tina. Could I please invite Anna Arnstein-Kerslik, please, to the floor?
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much again for bringing everyone together today. It's actually really lovely to see many people that I haven't seen in a long time. And thank you so much for this opportunity to speak for a moment about Gabor. I haven't seen Gabor in several years as well, but I wanted to share briefly how important Gabor was to me at the beginning of my career. And then a brief experience I had last week when I found out about his passing. I met Gabor when I was just beginning my PhD, and Gabor was one of the committee members on the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And I think he really was. So I have to give credit to Tina Minkowitz, because Tina introduced me to the concept of the right to legal capacity back in, I don't know, 2006 or something. But Gabor, when I was doing my PhD, he was kind of a touch point for me. And I feel like that's an experience that a lot of people have shared today, that whenever there was sort of confusion about what different sort of complexities in the law would mean, or how Article 12 would be applied, or what it would mean for people's lives, Gabor always had this amazing clarity that was absolutely essential for me, and I think still is, and is something that I do carry with me, and I will always carry with me. I also just wanted to share that his presence was always so calming, and I think a few people have shared that as well. I always picture him in this sort of beige linen suit that he had and wore quite frequently, I think. And it, I don't know, it just gave him this sort of guru aura, and was so appropriate and somehow comforting. And I also really appreciated that even though I was just a PhD student when we met, he really treated me, my opinion was valuable, that my insights, whatever insights I had, were useful and potentially valuable as well. And that's that's not something that everyone does. So and we'll always appreciate it. The other thing I wanted to share was that when I found out about Gabor's passing early last week, I was on my way to speak at the World Congress on Adult Capacity, as it's called now, which I think many of you are familiar with. I'd actually kind of distanced myself from this event because it used to be called the World Congress on Adult Guardianship. And I spoke at it in years past, and there are many people that go to it who are very wedded to ideas of substitute decision making, and I find it really challenging to be in that environment, especially when you have both professional and personal ties to a right to legal capacity, as I do, and of course as Gabor did. So I agreed to speak at this newly titled World Congress on Adult Capacity, and on my way to the airport, I found out that Gabor had passed away, and I really felt my confidence shaking when I found out that Gabor was gone, and I was heading to this very challenging forum. And the next day I had my presentation, and it was a 20-minute presentation, and I decided to spend the first 5 minutes of it in tribute to Gabor, speaking about his life, and the importance of his teachings and the guidance that he gave us all on Article 12. And I had them put a picture of Gabor up on the projection behind me. And I guess I just wanted to share that I really felt Gabor's presence there, in a room full of people that are quite resistant, I think, to many of the concepts in Article 12, or at least resistant to Article 12 sort of wholehearted adoption of Article 12, let's say. I think being able to spend time talking about Gabor and about, I think, the beauty of his words and his experiences, I think for me, it shaped the conference that day. And there was many people that came up afterwards and told me how important it was that we gave time to Gabor and to speak about him and his teachings. And I hope that might have shifted a few people's minds. And I know that Gabor's work will live on forever and continue to keep shifting minds as long as we're still talking about Article 12, which I'm sure will happen for many years in the future. Thank you very much for giving me that opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Anna. We also have a message here from Stefan Trommel, so I'll read that out if I may. I had the pleasure of working with Gabor during the negotiation process of the CRPD. I remember in particular the tense moment when we found out on the day the convention was being adopted that there was a footnote to Article 12 of the CRPD. I continued to be in touch with Gabor during the time he served on the CRPD committee, where he made great contributions on some of the most challenging elements of the CRPD. What struck me always with Gabor was both his humbleness and his amazing capacity to explain difficult topics in a way that we could all understand them. Only great people have this capacity, and I therefore fully agree when you refer to him as your CRPD guru. Catalina and I will miss Gabor so much. I think next, if I could, I'd like to invite Eric Rosenthal, please, to the floor.
Hello to you all. I think we would not be talking about the same Gabor if we didn't acknowledge that Gabor himself could be a very difficult person. I both loved Gabor and felt like strangling him back and forth many times over the years. There were at least 4 times when we had fallings out and stopped talking to each other. And I have to say, in the last 15 years of his life, we had not a personal word together. But that does not take away from the very deep sentiments and gratitude that I have for having known him and worked with him and struggled with him. He did play an important part of my life, and his passing has really brought about, some very profound thoughts, at least on a personal level, and in terms of, how we measure our own lives, each other's lives, the people in this room, all of whom have struggled. We could talk about Article 12 and legal capacity to the end. We're all human beings here who have dedicated our lives in one way or the other to this work. What I remember Gabor, I remember the sadness when he was trying to adopt a child in Hungary. And I remember when the authorities told him that because of his disability, he couldn't adopt a child unless it was a child with a disability who was leaving an orphanage. I mean, just the profound insult. You couldn't, a playwright couldn't write a modernist theater that would measure up to a response like that. And being with him during those times of great pain. When I first met Gabor in 1993, we met in a living room where it was an organization he was there to work on, because he was concerned because his mom had been institutionalized. Our first falling out happened when we were preparing for the release of our report on Hungary, the Hungarian mental health system in 1994, in which he felt that I was being too radical. And if we closed down the psychiatric facilities too quickly, the people would be left out on the streets. The fact that he could be so forthright and honest, tell me I was full of shit, and I was an imperialist American asshole, certainly was never fun to hear, but was underlying truth that he was always willing to say it like it is and like he felt. And so the good comes with the bad. I was plenty insulted and hurt many times by things he said, as well as moved and inspired, and think of the many times we came together and hugged each other, and really do appreciate that spirit. So I think Gabor has enriched my life as we have others, and really appreciate this opportunity to reflect on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe I saw Liz Brosnan's hand raised. Liz, are you here?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Sorry, like Mark Twain, I wish I'd had time to write a short piece, but I met Gabor in, I just devastated with the news when I saw it last week, but probably not surprised, because last time I saw him in Galway, we were chatting in a pub, and at that time he had just had a stroke, and he told me, that yeah, well, sure, what would you expect? I mean, he didn't say that. I'm saying it. When he presented at hospital, they detained him because he was found to, they thought he needed psych attention rather than medical attention. I met him. I heard him first speak in Dublin at something that when Amnesty were active in mental health in Ireland, though, I think it was to do with Fiona, they got Crowley got funding from Amnesty to actually look at mental health services in Ireland and how they were. And anyway, at something he was speaking, and I remember being awestruck by his ability to speak and communicate, and he really made so many things clear for me. That was many years ago. And the last time, like, I think it was Anna who spoke about his suits, and he turned up in Galway with Amita, and there's so many things I could say, but I just feel, given everything that's been going on, like he wasn't even a year older than me. I worked on a project with him, and we would bring, Rusi Stanov also came over. And like Rusi didn't speak a word of English, so there were translators and everything. I've lost so many friends to survivors, and the quiet people who would never have had a world presence like Gabor. But Gabor never, like I said, I met him last time I actually talked to him was in a pub in Galway. I accidentally met him because he ended up in my favorite pub, and we had quite an interesting long conversation. I think that's when he explained and told out his health and the worries, and then with everything and losing contact and not having, I just know the personal cost that somebody like Gabor and others in the survivor community who have been carrying the fight and the banner. And I was so happy to hear how he was respected and named as a guru. And he was everything everybody has said so far. I'm sorry I'm late, but time difference and everything. But I just, I think he will always live in my heart, like many of the others that have gone too soon. And we have to keep the fight going for and somehow take down and redistribute the money and the power that's in academia and in people who make their careers writing about our lives and our experiences, and take our work and run with it and build careers. Like last night, I see psychiatrists I had the stupidity to work with on another project years ago. A very damaging one for me, but they just last night, Google Scholar alerted me to these 4 psychiatrists still writing gobbledygook about how beneficial forced detention is. And we don't have any choice but to keep fighting and trying to take them down and redistribute that power and that money and that academic everything, the system, the establishment, and get some more money and resources back into the things that we know that Tina has written our book about. I know, intentional peer support. I know all the other many things. I see peers there, and that great work that they've started to document and find ways to dismantle the gobbledygook of the statistics that they are still churning out to create professorships for psychiatrists. Thinking that, clapping themselves on the back and saying if only we were less oppositionally defiant, that we would have happier lives and be more settled and chemically restrained people. And I know I'm emotional. I have many reasons to be. I've lost quite a number of friends in the past 6 months because of the crazy world we live in. So my condolences to the people who also love Gabor dearly. Challenging and everything else, but his mind will have to cut through the bullshit and at the same time be a gentleman. So rest in peace, Gabor.
Thank you, Liz. I actually see Mary's hand raised. So Mary Nettle.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Gabor had all this, we've heard all about his stuff with the UN CRPD and with the legal side of things. And I'd just like to quickly say how there's a man called Gabor Petri who is from is from Hungary, and I'm very grateful to him for connecting me via Mental Health Europe with Gabor. And I had a long conversation with him on WhatsApp, and this is just to say how technology has actually enabled and supported people like us across the world to be here and say these things. And I had a long conversation with him, and it was due to Gabor Petri, who put me in touch. And I just would like to say thank you to him, because Gabor was in a very bad place. Gabor Petri was explained in a really clear way how I could help and other people could help. And I do think that we need to remember that he managed to get a load of people to support Gabor in his. He had a long illness, as we already know, and I was so delighted to talk to him. And what I was going to say was, I thought that because he was so unwell, that it would be a difficult conversation, but it wasn't. It was fantastic. It was really wonderful. to talk to him. And it was possible, and I wish I'd talked to him more often, but of course that's the same with all of us. And I took over from survivors of psychiatry, and he was very supportive to me because I was completely innocent in a way as to what everything was. And I remember having a big issue in Enos about psychosocial disability, having our people with mental health issues disabled. And there was a huge row or discussion, I should say, about the fact that we were not disabled because we could walk and talk and, and it was really a difficult conversation, but it was well worth having because I think it has enabled us to adopt the UN CRPD as our way forward. But unfortunately, it's still a lot of people with mental health issues don't know about it, don't know they can use it, and all the rest of it. So we've got a long way to go, but I'm delighted to be here and to hear what everybody's got to say about Gabor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mary. I know that we have Dmitry Botanev here. Dmitry? Do we have you here, Dima? Wakar, is it possible to enable Dima to speak?
Yes, I'm doing that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Dima.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this sad occasion, but I think it demonstrates that the passion and the contribution which Gabor made during his life to promoting human rights of people with mental disabilities, and the way that how he helped all of us, including myself as a young lawyer. It demonstrates that his work and his contributions will definitely survive beyond his life. I met Gabor in 2004 when I was just beginning my legal career in human rights and mental disability and human rights, and when I just joined Validity, then Mental Disability Advocacy Center, where Gabor was working as an advocacy officer, and it was probably my first experience meeting a person with background and with his personal background as a survivor of psychiatric services. And I remember our meetings at MDC in Budapest, where mostly lawyers, we were introduced to the concepts with which we're trying to challenge, and sometimes the concepts, the structures, legal constructs which had seemed to be cast in stone. And it was exactly Gabor who helped me, and I think my colleagues, to see that there are lots of problems which we cannot identify unless we talk to people with experience in mental health, experience as patients, experience as survivors, experience as peers with other persons having received mental health care. And definitely thanks to Gabor, I myself was able to start challenging these ideas which were and which are still at the basis of the regulation of mental health services and restrictions of patients' rights. But exactly because of these tough disputes, and definitely I would totally subscribe to what Eric has just said, that Gabor was indeed a tough person, but thanks to his ability to explain the things in a very simple way, but still to adhere to the principles, to the values, which were not sometimes that obvious to us lawyers. This has helped to develop the core values, I think, and to be able to contribute to promoting these values in many countries, in many jurisdictions. And I think that the very fact that I have stayed in the mental disability and human rights field for almost 20 years now, and it's thanks to such people, to Gabor and to him personally, because he has helped me to see that the work and the efforts which we have invested in this field, they have fruits, they have tangible results. They sometimes result in changing international legal instruments, as this story with this ill-famous footnote for CRPD has demonstrated. I will definitely miss Gabor because for me, he was an internal part of MDAC, now Validity Foundation, and I definitely will miss him as part of this family. So my true condolences to everyone who loved Gabor, and I will I have made a promise to myself to continue working in the mental disability and human rights field to commemorate the contributions which Gabor has made to this important work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dima. Diana Samarison has asked to speak, and I know that Alex Coates also. So Diana, please.
Thank you, Stephen, and thanks everyone who organized this event. I've written directly to Gabor something because I didn't get to say it to him directly, but I will do that now. Gabor, in many ways, you changed the course of my life. When I met you in 2004, I was heading the Mental Disability Advocacy Center in Budapest, now Validity. I had seen the horrors of institutions in Eastern Europe, and I had met survivors, but you were different. Your articulation of injustice and of a different possible future were unparalleled. Some thought I was rash to hire you. It was not always easy. You were not always easy. But rage against injustice is a fire I understand. It has driven me too, though coming from a different place and for different reasons. The change you wrought with your advocacy during your time at MDAC as the first outspoken activist with disability hired, and in the ad hoc committee meetings, working on Article 12 with Tina and others, and in the course of your life since then has meant so much to the world and to me personally. I want to thank you for opening my eyes and mind to speaking truth to power, to knowing one's personal experience, and yes, rage matters to others' lives, So I'm not going to say rest in peace or rest in power, but rather rage on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana. Alex Coate.
Thank you very much. Sorry. I just spent so many weeks with Gabor, training everywhere, with so many people. And the patience, the generosity, sharing and getting naked. That was always surprising to me. How he could like bring the PhD, the physicist, the lawyer without the lawyer, and the life, and just sharing and listening. And so many times I have seen, you know, in the ha-ha moment where people open the eyes, where they say, oh, I didn't see it this way. I didn't think of it this way. And I just wanted to say, I don't think there is rest in peace, or because in all of us, and in so many people, hundreds, thousands of people that have listened to Gabor, met Gabor, there is a little Gabor. Because the way we think about things and the way we do things have been so much influenced, even if we don't know it, there is a little Gabor in us. And I think we will cherish that for as long as we can. Oh.
Thank you, Alex. Bhargavi, we have a message, I believe, from Dwi Ariani.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. I'm just going to read this out. Dwi's internet was poor, so she could not join us online. Dwi's sorrow is, my sorrow is deep and personal. It fills my heart at this moment. Professor Gabor Gambos has quietly closed the door of life and departed from us. Our lives will be empty in the areas that he had brightened for us. He gave much to his work to advance the rights of persons with psychosocial disabilities around the world. Gabor was an excellent advocate and lecturer, dedicated his life to advocate for the rights of persons with psychosocial disability to be able to live independently in the community. He will always be remembered and as one of the disability champions and will continue to inspire us.
Thank you very much. Friends, if there is anyone else who would like to speak, please just raise your hand before we move towards the closing intervention today, which will be given by Amita Danda. If there is anyone who would like to speak before, then just please make yourself known. If not, I'd like to give the floor over, please, to Amita. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, everyone. It has been a very moving evening, but I also somewhere would want to say that, yes, we've all remembered the human rights defender, the professor, the advocate, and he would often say that I don't want to be remembered as a monument. So I do think what I would want to say here is that there were so many Gabors. There was that Gabor who could look just anybody in the eye and be as nasty as can be. There was the other Gabor also, who was as vulnerable, who had seen the adversities and oppression on his own body and who used what he experienced to fuel the work he did. But that doesn't mean that the hurt he felt or the deprivation he encountered or the discrimination that he experienced was any less for him, because he could surmount and speak and give the rest of us that sort of passion on the strength of which we could fight further. I do think we need to celebrate the Gabor who did as much as he did for the world, for the cause. But I also think we shouldn't forget the other Gabor who sort of like did experience in a very, very major kind of way the deprivations. I do think that it's important that we make the sort of arrangements and make the kind of world where it's not important or not necessary that a person has to be on the stake to get a better world. It's important somewhere that it is extremely important that we try to, as we sort of plan forward and think forward, we think of not just the defender, not just the advocate, but also the person for whose vulnerability it is. See, Gabor was lucky. I mean, I've been asked by so many people, we send condolences to family. And as I've been listening to people through the whole evening, it's like, this is family. This is a man who was able to create a family across countries, across professions, across sectors, and was able to do that. And very often sometimes didn't even know it himself that he was able to do that, but he was able to do that. But then to that extent, he was the exception. I think it's important that we start to talk in terms of difference, and we talk about inclusion in a manner where human rights defending and fighting for a better world doesn't have to mean that you have to be crucified yourself. It's not necessary that you should have to do it on your own body. So it's important. I would somewhere want us to, as a very appropriate agenda that we want to put in place going forward, what we need to be doing, that when we want people to advocate and advocate causes, we should also remember that they also need bread and butter to eat. They also need other kind of arrangements. And it should not be that the battle is between, like, I have to fight for this cause, or I have to, and get destroyed myself in the process. It shouldn't have to be that case. I don't want us to forget the vulnerability as we remember the strength. I don't want us to forget the anger or the sense of, as we remember the generosity, because both those things were simultaneously present. And I do think it's important that Gabor should be remembered in his entirety, and strength and vulnerability, because I think he was a great human rights defender because he was human all the time. And it was that humanity which he was all of the time touching each of us that shouldn't get forgotten. I'm certain that, I was saying to Shani at one point that the typical performer Gabor would be very happy that, oh, everybody is kind of missing me. And he would actually sit and count who are the people who said what about him. It was like he would look at how many likes he's got for, those were things which were very, very important for him. And he said, what the hell, I did this and this many people liked it and stuff. That would be important for him. But he would also sort of simultaneously turn around and then say, okay, but when I have my off moment, when I am not all there, I need a community and people. He was very pleased that we had this amazing support network which was put together just for him. But I think we should remember that what was done for Gabor, the great human rights defender, should be as much available for people who may not be that kind of great. So it's like we make arrangements for both. We celebrate both the strong, powerful Gabor and the vulnerable Gabor, and make arrangements for both. I think for me, that would be the way of remembering Gabor. It's like, what should I say? Gabor for me was like a unique combination of the personal and the professional. I don't want to end in tears, so I would just want to thank all of you as maybe as a very close friend of Gabor, and possibly because as a close friend of Gabor, he wouldn't have let this pass by not talking about the things that we didn't talk about. So he would want to talk about them. And I would say maybe it's my way of doing a Gabor on Gabor. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Stephen. I'm sorry if I kind of like
no need to be sorry at all.
I don't know, I think Bhargavi had said to me at one point, friend of Fiand, and I suppose that's what Gabor was. He was both Fiand and friend, and I presume that's the way in which I would at least want us to think of him. But I would also not just say only Fiand. He was also this very vulnerable young man, a child who was kind of in a way looking for acceptance over a lifetime. And I'm so glad that this is the extent of people he's touched, whose hearts he's touched, and people who possibly at some points he might have felt have forgotten him. But the very fact that so many remember and remember so poignantly, I think it's the biggest tribute we could pay to a great human being. Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amita. And thank you to us all and to all of you, but most importantly to him. Thank you.
So I suppose we're close. Bye-bye, everybody. So many of you, one is so happy to have, like reconnected with. And I hope that as we move forward, we can think of something more lasting in Gabor's memory. Some of his work we could be archiving in a more systematic kind of way. There's this huge amount of work he's done in India, work he's done in other parts of the world. And I do think that possibly Validity and TCI and Bapu and Nalsar, where he was professor before he was professor at Bolge. I'm sorry, I couldn't help scoring that point.
Thank you so much, Amita. It'll be our honor to work on this with you. Bye-bye.